Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a truly mind-bending journey into one of the most intimate, yet honestly baffling mysteries of our existence, the concept of the self. We're going to decode the I by exploring the groundbreaking work of cognitive scientist Douglas Hofstadter. So grab your mental seatbelt, because this is probably going to fundamentally change how you view yourself. Okay, let's just jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the mystery of the I, move down to particles, neurons, and symbols, and then unpack the strange loop concept. After that, we'll hit the grand pusher illusion, living inside other brains, and wrap up with a beautiful, indispensable mirage. All right, Section 1, the mystery of the I and decoding consciousness. Let's start with something we all feel every single second we're awake. Your sense of self, your I, feels incredibly real, doesn't it? I mean, it feels rock solid, kind of like there's a tiny pilot sitting just behind your eyes, steering the whole ship. But I want to pose a fundamental question directly to you. What do we actually mean when we say I? When you tell someone, hey, I'm hungry or I'm happy, who exactly is in charge? What is actually doing the feeling? To get a handle on this, we've got to turn to cognitive pioneer Marvin Minsky. He famously argued that consciousness is really just a suitcase word. You know, a word where we just pack a whole bunch of different, highly complex mental processes into it simply because we're completely blind to the microscopic machinery that's actually operating inside our heads. We say, I chose this because, well, we literally cannot feel our neurons firing. Yet, even with this total blindness to the mechanics of our own brains, to every single human being, this I is the realest thing in the world. It's an absolutely indispensable concept. It feels like the ultimate truth of our existence, even if we can't quite pinpoint what it is physically. So Section 2, particles, neurons, and symbols, the hierarchy of the brain. To really unravel this mystery, we have to deconstruct the brain and look at it across radically different levels of scale. Think about the stark contrast between these two levels. Deep down at the bottom, your brain is, well, it's just a chaotic, seething soup of meaningless physical particles. But up at the top level, it operates as this vast network of high-level abstractions that Hofstadter calls symbols. So the big question is, how on earth do we get from a meaningless physical soup to meaningful thoughts? Well, it's all about the hierarchy of scales. As author James Gleick points out when discussing complex dynamical systems, you really have to recognize this upward hierarchy. From the neurons upward, it's the complex interplay of the microscale and the macroscale. Actually, it's a lot like the dynamics of fluid turbulence. That's what allows the high-level reality of thoughts to magically emerge from the low-level biology. Okay, so let's define what we mean by a symbol. In the brain, a symbol isn't like a written letter on a page. It's an active, triggerable physical structure. It's basically the brain's way of implementing a category or a concept. Your brain is essentially a stage for the fluid dance of these symbols. And consciousness itself is just the selective triggering. It's the dance of thinking. Which brings us to Section 3, the strange loop concept, how meaningless symbols acquire meaning. Now we hit the core concept of today's explainer. What is the specific mechanism that allows a bunch of physical particles to suddenly feel like a person? Hofstadter calls this mechanism a strange loop. It's an abstract loop where a shift from one level of abstraction to another gives rise to a closed, paradoxical cycle. Inside your brain, the high-level symbolic layer and the low-level physical layer feed back into each other. They cross levels in a way that literally creates a brand new reality. You can kind of visualize this as a special type of swirly, tangled pattern. In formal mathematical systems, meaning simply cannot be kept out. Through complex tracking and mirroring, meaningless symbols actually acquire meaning. They twist back on themselves and become self-aware. This tangled, self-referential loop of meaning is the very architecture of your mind. To really wrap our heads around this, let's contrast it with simple video feedback, like, pointing a camera directly at its own monitor. Sure, that creates cool, infinitely regressing shapes, but it's an empty loop. It lacks symbols. It perceives absolutely nothing. But a human brain strange loop? Entirely different. It requires a massive repertoire of triggerable symbols and active perception. You aren't just reflecting reality. You are actively categorizing and thinking about the feedback you generate. All right, Section 4, the grand pusher illusion and downward causality. Here is where we shift gears, because we have to talk about how this abstract loop suddenly seems to take total control of our physical reality. Let's walk through it.
First, the brain senses its environment and takes action. Second, because of its architecture, the brain senses itself and its own incredible complexity. But here's the trick. Our frame default machinery desperately seeks a single cause for things. So third, the brain just invents a single cause to fill the gap. It attributes all these complex processes to an entity it calls me. Minsky calls this the immanence illusion. Hofstadter calls it downward causality. Hofstadter uses this absolutely brilliant metaphor for it: the marble in a box of envelopes. Imagine a thick stack of envelopes, all glued together, with a marble-shaped hollow cutout of the exact center. If you reach in, you feel a solid marble, but there's no marble there, just empty space defined by the overlapping paper. Your eye is the grand pusher of your body. It's an incredibly convincing illusion of solidity created entirely by overlapping abstract patterns. So the crucial point is this massive paradox right here. Does an eye exert genuine power over the particles in our brain, or is it helplessly pushed around by the all-powerful laws of physics? Causality literally gets flipped upside down in our heads. The abstract symbols appear to be the things pushing the physical particles around. The illusion is so perfect, and honestly so useful for our survival, that we simply cannot escape it.
Moving on to Section 5, living inside other brains, entwinement and empathy.
Let's see how this builds into something even more profound. For me, this is the real mind-bending twist of the explainer. Because if the eye is just a symbolic pattern, a strange loop, then it isn't physically trapped inside a single skull. Let's compare our everyday assumption with Hofstadter's radical view. We usually believe in the caged bird metaphor, right? One brain, one soul, rigidly locked in one body. But Hofstadter's entwinement view argues that one brain hosts many souls. Your identity is distributed. Your brain actually hosts fluid, coarse-grained copies of the strange loops of everyone you know and love.
Because of our immense capacity for empathy and intimacy, we manufacture stripped-down versions of our own strange loop to represent others. Your personal I flits into other brains, meaning a very real part of your actual consciousness, your unique strange loop, survives and lives in the minds of your friends and family. You are literally a part of them. And finally, Section 6, a beautiful, indispensable mirage, self-writing poems. Let's slow down the pace for a second and bring this incredible journey to a close. We went from a chaotic soup of meaningless particles all the way up to the beautiful sharing of human souls. Hofstadter leaves us with this stunning, poetic conclusion. We are not static, solid objects. We are self-inventing mirages. Realizing that you are a swirling, abstract loop of meaning, an unpredictable, self-writing poem, is a far more beautiful and profound way to understand your existence than just clinging to the illusion of a solid marble in your head. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought today. If your eye is really just a strange loop, a fluid pattern of symbols rather than a physical object locked in a cage, whose loops are currently running inside you? Take a moment today to think about the people you hold dear and realize they're dancing right there in your mind. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the beautiful mirage of your own self.